Hello everyone, welcome to PBL B on the K-12 sector, presented to you by Violet, Santa, Brody, and Kaylee. Just to give you an overview of how we're going to proceed, we're going to start with our research question and some analysis questions for you. We'll talk about blended learning and the associated online models, some principles of blended learning infrastructure, assessment of technology within blended learning. We've got a clip from a TED Talk video about moving forward using blended learning in the K-12 sector, and we'll wrap it up with some synthesis questions. Our guiding research question was, based on a blended learning approach, how do the online learning models serve the K-12 sector in relation to infrastructure and assessment? Here's some analysis questions for you to ponder while watching the video. 1. What is the predominant type of blended learning currently found in most K-12 classrooms? 2. Identify one of the largest problems that blended learning has helped to address. 3. What are some of the securing principles of a blended learning infrastructure? 4. What forms of technology are consistently found in a typical K-12 environment? Let's discuss 4 types of blended learning delivery. First, rotation. Students rotate on a fixed schedule between online instruction and in-class face-to-face instruction. Both are done in the classroom setting. This is the predominant type of blended learning used in the majority of grades from kindergarten to 12. Students are able to access more in-depth material at a time, and also able to learn from teachers in a smaller class setting where more individualized help may occur. The flex model. This is mostly online content, where students can progress at their pace and teachers are available to meet in small study groups with students on an as-needed basis. Self-blended. It's not a traditional whole school experience, as the students choose to take one or more completely asynchronous courses. The asynchronous courses can be taken on campus as well as off campus. The enriched virtual model is seen as a whole school experience, as the students spend their time between both being on campus and learning online. Usually begins as fully online and slowly blends into the traditional brick and mortar experiences. Commonalities do exist between the flex model and the self-blended model, as they're both individualized to the student's needs. The majority of growth in online learning across the K-12 sector is taking place in a blended learning manner, where teachers are able to maintain supervision over the learning, yet provide more personalized content to the learner, and that's taken from Horn and Staker 2011. Blended learning has played a large part in the shift to a new structure of teaching, allowing more flexibility in finances and teacher resources. Some successes through the implementation of blended learning exist, with educators and facilitators being able to tackle many challenges. For example, educators have had more success with dropout and credit recovery programs. Within the various models, students can access the most current sources of content using affordances best suited to their learning purposes. Blended learning provides students access to course material anywhere, anytime, and they still have access to teachers to clarify any issues. Some of the greatest successes can be seen in split grade classrooms. Teachers are able to focus on one grade, while the other grade is utilizing technology to get that day's lessons or follow up on current work. Finally, blended learning has addressed one of the largest problems throughout the K-12 sector, and that is shrinking budgets and teacher shortages. Teachers are able to take on more and yet provide a more intimate, personalized, and advanced educational experience. According to Watson 2008, the blended learning infrastructure within the K-12 sector combines elements of both online learning and face-to-face learning, and is likely to emerge as the predominant teaching model of the future. Worthen and Pace 2014 discuss 4 principles of securing infrastructure and blended learning. The first is greater rigor and relevance. Quote, measurement of student learning would be based on ensuring that students are on track and held to high, rigorous standards and aligned competencies from cradle to career to be successful in college and the workforce. End quote. The second principle discussed is moving from one size fits all to fits each student. This principle is based and built around the needs of each student versus the teacher or the institute. Time would be variable and learning constant, versus our current situation where policies drive forward many learning and educational decisions as they are time-based. Students would take charge of their learning and therefore be actively engaged. Finally, educators will be prepared to adapt instruction to the individual student's needs with robust, multi-tiered supports and universal learning design. The third principle surrounds educator empowerment. Blended learning is geared towards personalized collaborative instruction where educators are able to take a more active role, consuming the role of facilitator versus teacher, in designing assessments cater to individuals' needs and circumstance. The last principle is transparency and equity. This framework helps narrow the achievement gap and set personal goals for each student. Through a variety of assessments, educators will be able to monitor their progression, not as an average, rather by their own learning timeline. This creates opportunities to provide the right support with the right tools based on each student, rather than the majority. Ntuli 2014 is quoted as saying, "Technology has transformed pedagogy and shifted the educational terrain." As a group, we believe that there is an importance in assessment, not only of the students, but of the technological tools being used for their success. It is seen in the day-to-day K-12 sector that technology is always available in some capacity, whether by a shared classroom smartboard, a set of class tablets, or computers, or even modernized projectors, just to name a few. In a case study performed by Ntuli 2014, findings indicate that after a lesson and classwork using technology, the majority of teachers reviewed students' work or the products to make decisions concerning the effectiveness of the use of such technology without actually assessing the technology itself. In that same study, Ntuli discovered that 40% of teachers involved interviewed their own students to learn the extent to which students thought the technology was effective. The findings of this case study reveal that a good number of teachers do not, in fact, assess the effectiveness of instructional technology tools, and those who do assess have limited strategies. A streamlined approach to assessing technological devices would greatly benefit the K-12 sector when utilizing a blended learning approach. So how can the technology be assessed? Well, according to Basham, Smith, and Satter 2016, as the K-12 education system moves increasingly online, it becomes more dependent on the educational technology industry to support the design of digital instructional materials and experiences. Thus, it's important for educators, researchers, and the industry to develop a shared understanding as well as expectations for these online materials and systems. Our researcher-created UDL scan tool, as stated by Basham, Smith, and Satter, provides researchers and educators with a measurement tool to review online content systems for their potential to support learner accessibility and variability. Each UDL guideline and checkpoint was mapped to specific features within a content system. Each item on the UDL scan tool aligns with one of UDL's 3 principles, 9 guidelines, and at least 1 checkpoint, measuring each of them for each lesson evaluated. Providing a scan tool such as the one mentioned, and even a prerequisite to technology within blended learning would make for an enriched learning environment that could be an embedded feature of our provincial and even federal curricula.
And teaching and learning will change. And so in order to use this tool, we have to change. And this can be really scary. When a school asks me, what would we need to do to be able to go blending? Or we're thinking about going blended, what would we need? And I usually say one of 4 questions, or all 4 questions. 1, are you flexible? Do you have the flexibility to midway through the year completely change what you're doing because it's not working? Are you flexible enough to let teachers be innovators and have them do different things than each other or than you planned, and let them experiment to find these best practices? 2, are you committed? You can't go halfway. You can't say, yeah, kids are going to learn on computers every day, but not be prepared to fix them immediately, or not have the bandwidth needed to have all the kids on the computer at the same time. In order to be fully committed to this model, you also need to train teachers to be proficient at using these programs and to commit to using the data in order to make the students' work valid and visible. The next question I have is about mindset. If you sit a student at a computer, how are you going to know that they want to engage with that program? This program is only as valuable as the student thinks it is. And so I'm going to paraphrase Carol Dweck. She said, what do we do if a student does a math problem and they do it perfectly and they do it quickly? Do we praise them? And she would have said no. What we say is, I'm sorry I wasted your time. That was obviously too easy. Let me find something that you can learn from. And that's the type of mindset that we need to be encouraging with our students. When they sit down at that computer, do they believe that the work they are doing will make a difference, will be valued? The last question I ask is about the role of the teacher. Some would say in this model that teachers matter less since computers are taking over some of the instruction. But I actually think teachers matter more in this model. They are now the orchestrators of these complex learning paths, picking which program should go for which student. They have to now target all the skills that the computer can't do. How to motivate that child, how to connect what they're doing to their home life, how to create a hands-on project that complements what they're doing online. All of these will mean that the teacher needs to be a critical thinker and an innovator, and we'll need to treat them.
And now some synthesis questions for you to consider. 1. What criteria would you say is important to incorporate into a UDL for technology within the K-12 sector? 2. What necessary next steps do you feel is required in order to ensure that blended learning is balanced across the K-12 sector? And 3. How much involvement do you think federal policymakers should have in designing blended learning infrastructures? And a concluding thought in a quote. In Canada, online learning is a feature of the education system in all 13 territories and provinces. In 2011, it was estimated that over 200,000 students were enrolled in online courses and/or programs. Ontario Ministry of Education funds and oversees the development of online learning courses and provides learning management systems for all 72 districts. Online learning, teaching content, is uploaded into Ontario Educational Resource Banks, which is accessible to all Ontario teachers, students, and parents. And that's from Daishev, Jashiva, Agre, and Angelova, 2013. Thank you.